We're turning to Europe and Global View columnist Bret Stephens, who's joining us to talk about punishment and non-punishment in Norway. Bret, getting into the chair here. Welcome.
Good to be here, Mary.
Okay, so mass murderer Ander Behring Breivik took the stand again today in Oslo, where he's accused of massacring some 77 people, innocent people.
Most of them teenagers.
Most of them teenagers. What kind of a punishment does this guy face?
Well, there are two possibilities. He's now facing a 10-week hearing in court to determine whether he's sane or insane. And if you listen to the guy, there's no question this is a kind of personification of evil, but he's certainly sane. Now, if he's judged insane, he'll spend the rest of his life probably in a psychiatric institution, which seems to be the punishment he really fears, because this is a guy who wants his ideas taken seriously, and if he's dismissed as being an insane person, well, he's just ranting. If, however, he's ruled sane, then he could be sentenced to the longest prison term that Norwegian law has to offer. That's 21 years in prison. Not a life sentence, not even half a life sentence. Ander Breivik is 33 years old. Maybe he'll be 34 if he's sentenced, which means that he can look forward to getting out of jail when he's in his mid-50s, provided that Norwegians don't find means to basically keep him in on the assumption that he's a menace to society.
Well, what an example of the divergence of the U.S. concept of justice and the European sense of justice. How did these two systems diverge so much, Bret? Why is it that Norway has established, how is it that they've established a system where a guy like this could potentially get out of jail in his 50s?
Look, that's a very complicated question, and there are a lot of sort of historical and philosophical reasons. Norway, of course, is its own country, has its own feelings about the death penalty, about crime and punishment. It abolished the death penalty in 1905, probably the first European country to do so. Countries like Britain and France didn't do so until the 1960s and 70s. You could make the argument that in countries like Scandinavia, the whole idea that someone could simply be an evil and irredeemably evil person is just a difficult one to digest. But there's a third point. Remember that here in the United States, we've basically looked at government and the agencies of government, including law enforcement agencies, as being the good guys. Europe has long experience with governments being the bad guys. Nazi Germany, the Stasi in East Germany, and so on. So there are sort of legitimate cultural reasons why Europeans take a somewhat different view of the agencies of law enforcement than we do, even if they've been living in a kind of model democracy like Norway for generations.
We're talking to Global View columnist Bret Stephens about the trial of the mass murderer Breivik in Norway this week. Has this case, Bret, provoked any kind of soul-searching in Norway about their justice system?
Well, it's interesting. You know, right now in this hearing, the way Norwegian law works, and I hardly present myself as an expert on the subject, but apparently there are 5 or 6 judges. 2 of them are professional judges, and then the other 3 are lay judges, sort of citizens acting as judges. And one of the lay judges took to, I think it was Facebook or an internet chat room just a few days ago, saying the only appropriate way to respond to Breivik is to sentence him to death. Now, I suspect that played very well with a lot of Norwegians, that this is the only way you answer a guy who proudly boasts not only that he murdered 77 defenseless people, but that he would do it again. But as the Norwegian legal system had it, he was instantly dismissed, or almost instantly dismissed, as a judge in the case. And this is, I think, a real problem that Europe is going to have to confront, that there are so many taboos about what is and isn't permissible to say on some of these very basic issues, that they have a very difficult time translating popular feeling into a kind of legal regime that reflects those views.